Well, good evening. It is a pleasure to be able to be with you all tonight. Thank you for coming out. And I know that this topic is a rather interesting one. And even as we're talking about anxiety, I have anxiety. So it's something that we live with in our bodies, in who we are. And we want to be able to care well for our children. And I know that some of you are here for that reason. Maybe you're here for some other reason. Maybe you need help even with your own anxiety, how you deal with anxiety within you. And I hope that even tonight as we talk, that it might be helpful to you. So as we get going, what I'd love to do here at the outset is to kind of get to hear from you first. What are the areas of anxiety that you would like me to try to hit tonight? The subjects of anxiety, maybe issues with your children that I might be able to speak into. We'll have a question and answer later, but I just want to be able to get at the outset what I might be able. As I'm going, I can keep this list here, and as I'm thinking about things, I can speak into situations. Please know that I don't know everything. I don't come as the expert in all of this. I come as somebody, as a fellow father, as a fellow parent who has dealt with anxiety in my children and anxiety in myself, and have sought to care well for them. And so, I'll offer suggestions, but and some insight. But let's go ahead. Okay. Harder. So you're saying that you'd like a talk like this given to the kids, to the youth. Well, I could do that. However, I hope that even tonight, as I go through this, I'll explain it in such a way that you'll be able to walk with your son or daughter, and they may not get it the first time, but them experiencing you do it, they might catch on and say, hey, Dad's different right now. I don't understand this, but something's different here. He's dealing with me different than he has in the past. And I think that's a beautiful thing. They may not know the lingo. I hope tonight might be an encouragement to you that you don't necessarily need the lingo. So that's an idea. Yes. Okay. Uh-huh. Okay.
Even more than the test, just for some students, you mentioned the subject matter, and they just, from math to reading, and all of a sudden they just go white.
Okay. Oh, sure. So we heard tests. The first person offered anxiety over tests and speeches. And then the next one was it's the switching of subjects. Just, yeah.
All right, I'll hold it when it turns on. As a teacher, I'm looking to be able to identify some of the typical things you'll see when some kid is starting to feel anxious and what it is that we can be doing in the moment to try and alleviate that.
Okay.
And then as a parent, I'm looking for what can I be doing for my children that have very sensitive hearts and have very big emotions and can get very stressed out about things quickly, and they get ramped up, and you got to figure out how do you ramp them back down.
Yeah. Good question. Okay.
So I have
I get very triggered, and then I don't react well. And then the focus is on my sin, as it should be, but we aren't really dealing with the root issue. So a way to help them verbalize and a way to calm the situation down for everyone.
Yeah. Right here.
Anxiety around overnights away from home.
Overnights away from home.
I've observed several sources of anxiety in our girls. On the academic side, there's sometimes an anxiousness about a perceived need for perfection that can almost be crippling sometimes. Similarly, maybe tied into big hearts, the idea of bad things happening in the world can be very crippling in their perception of reality, their perception of where we stand in relation to our loving Father when these things can happen, either impersonally from a distance or even sometimes nearby threats.
Sure. Yes.
One topic would be just like anxiety around what other people think of them in certain situations.
For us, it's how to not project your own anxiety into our child.
All right, as a teacher and specifically a music teacher, I see a lot of performance anxiety and stress anxiety about getting up and talking and performing in front of people.
Yeah. All right. Well, I will tell you right now, I don't have a magic pill. But let's dive in. So the first area where I want us to think about tonight is I want to give you some background, some foundation from which to work from. So that way we're both talking the same language, as the gentleman in the back said. Okay? And if you've watched the trauma video, the trauma lecture, some of this is going to be similar. I've kind of tweaked it just a bit in one area, but so some of this may sound familiar to you if you've watched it. If you haven't, this will catch you up. So the first thing is God has made us in such a way that we are made as image bearers of Him. All of us were created to be reflections of Him in all of His holiness and His goodness, and because of that, there is an element of dignity and respect given to each one of us. Secondly, we were being made in His image. We were made to have relationship with one another, and in being in relationship with one another, there are three categories that I'm going to talk about in a few minutes. Attunement, containment, and repair. All of us are designed to have these three things: attunement, containment, and repair. And without them, we begin to go awry. The next thing is that the reality that the world we live in, we experience trauma and brokenness due to Adam and Eve's fall into sin. Sin, having entered into the world in Genesis 3, corrupted our hearts so that that means we have brokenness within our relationships with other people, with God, and even ourselves. And so we experience sin as we commit it towards one another people, or we experience sin committed against us, and we experience the effects of sin in the brokenness of this world. So our minds do not work as well as they ought to. We get cancer. We get various diseases. You know, there's the corruption of the world is not working as the way it should be. In Romans, it says that the earth groans for us. Our bodies are part of that. And the anxiety that we experience on a day in, day out basis, beyond the ways that that our anxiety actually was supposed to serve us, when it goes beyond that, it's the brokenness. It's the brokenness of sin. And so, as we deal with our children, as we deal with ourselves and our bodies, there's a sense where we're dealing with the brokenness of sin and the effects of sin in our life. And so we've got to, we got to deal with that. So let's go back and talk about these three categories. These are the three categories that are important, that will help lay this foundation down. The first one is attunement. We were made to be valued, to be known, and to be loved, to be cherished, to be heard, and to be seen. We come out of the womb wanting somebody to see us, as Dr. Kurt Thompson once said. I think we can all agree and have experienced the lack of attunement. But we also know what it's like to be seen, to be known, and to be loved, the peace that is there, right? And this is something that God does even himself. All throughout the scriptures, we see language of God seeing, God hearing, and God knowing. In Exodus 2, this is before, obviously, the Israelites are taken out of Egypt. They're in those 400 years. And can you imagine being in those 400 years when God is silent? And you're thinking, God, where are you? And he says, God saw and heard and knew the Israelites, everything that was going on, but the time was not right yet. And then finally he brings Moses into the picture and brings the Exodus. So this idea of attunement, that we are loved and seen, we experience anxiety when we're not loved and seen and heard. If sometimes if we've known it, and then we go with a period of there's some kind of break, and then for some unknown reason, and then we experience absence of it, we can be anxious about not having that love and that attunement. The next one is containment. Containment is the idea that we are not only made to know love and to know acceptance and value and being cherished, but we're also to live with some order, with some structure. Okay? There is an element of need for power and strength in our life. A containment. So if we think of a cup, if we think of this cup, right? This container is strong enough to hold this water, okay? We need that in our lives. We need to know that as children in our families, my mom is not going to overlove me, or my dad is not going to be overbearing on me, or vice versa, okay? We need to know that there's a container holding us. And God does that with us, even in our lives. He does that through the law, through holiness, through all of the the areas where he says, I am your safety and your refuge and your rock and your strength. He is the container. And when we don't have that container, when we don't experience being contained, having that, sensing that containment, we can begin to have anxiety. So, when we're stepping up onto the stage for a presentation, or we're stepping onto the stage for a musical performance, we're stepping into vulnerability, right? I step onto this stage, I come here tonight, none of you know me, right? And I can look at it and say, I am my own person, and I am the only one that can be responsible for me. Or I can look at it and say, no, God is here with me. I'm not alone. And he is going to protect me at whatever that means. This is where I was saying to Tim a little earlier, this is an imagery that I've been using as of recent. And I feel like while it's kind of a different picture, I think it does give the essence of it. So I want you to think of a prison. Now, I know our lives are not prisons, okay? But think with me in terms of anxiety. In a prison, you have multiple boundaries, right? You have, at the outermost, you have this outer boundary that prevents anybody from coming in. And then once you get inward, once you get into the building, there's locks, there's a system of checks and balances that take you in. Then you take you into the next wing, and then they take you into your cell, right? So you've got these different layers of boundaries, of containers that are happening. Well, oftentimes when we have anxiety, we think this. It's up to me. There's nothing else out there. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to live like this. We think it's all up to ourselves. And what God is trying to help us with is to say, no, I'm the outer boundary. You've got your family here, as we live within families. You've got your church. You know, you've got coverage. There is safety and security in me. And we're designed to know containment. We're not designed to live this world on our own. So that's the idea of containment. Containment then turns, the last one is repair. If attunement and containment don't happen successfully, we need to know as human beings that our parents or whoever's in charge is going to make up for it. That they're going to come to us and say, I'm sorry, I failed you. There's too many. So if there's over attunement or under attunement or over containment or under containment, there's the opportunity for us to come back and say, I'm sorry, will you please forgive me? That time of repair needs to be there. So you get the three: attunement, containment, and repair. So this is the matrix. Part of my training, which, by the way, I would say in the flyer, I didn't graduate from Dan Allender. I would say I studied with him and his team, okay? So in the Allender Center, they have what's called the matrix. This is what was created. And so the top three are his, and the two rows on the bottom are his. The one in the middle is kind of my idea about how we experience this within our body. So attunement, being known, being valued, and loved and cherished is the foundation for faith. It's where we can begin to say, I have experienced you love me in the past. I have faith in you. I trust you. Okay? Containment is the foundation for hope. If I know that, and of course we know that faith, the scriptures tell us that faith is the foundation for hope, because hope is the faith for things unseen, right? So faith is towards the past, hope is faith for the future. I hope that you're going to be kind to me in the future. I hope that this cup will hold this water. It won't leak, right? Simple, but the picture's there. And then repair and then love is the outflow for repair in the present. So you have faith, hope, and love. Sin, and this is where I didn't talk in the trauma training, because of the presence of sin and the role of the enemy in our lives, we end up, faith becomes twisted because we experience betrayal. That trust is broken. We believe that if you have sinned against me in the past, that you have betrayed me. Now, betrayal is a very strong word, but if you think about being hurt by someone that you have loved and trusted, that's what you feel. You feel betrayed. Hope, twisted, you struggle with powerlessness. I don't have the strength to make it on my own. I don't have the strength to put myself back together. And so you experience powerlessness or futility. The third one is ambivalence. Ambivalence is when we have two contradictory emotions at the same time. So when we want to see our parents, we are like, yes, I want to see you. I want to experience your love, but no, you intrude on me, and I don't want you. And so there's these two emotions happening at the same time. That's ambivalence, which then leads us to what we experience in our bodies as being shame. And the ambivalence leads us to shame because of that vulnerability. The powerlessness, we often feel anxious because we don't have the strength to do it, and betrayal with the depression. We begin to say, I just don't, nobody loves me. We fall into depression. The depression and the anxiety, you can be anxious and depressed on both sides, but in general, those are in generalities. Most often when we experience betrayal, we're going to experience depression. When we experience powerlessness, we're going to experience anxiety. So this is how this all kind of comes together. And we're going to see how this plays out as we talk about anxiety with our children. Where am I right now? Are you completely lost? No? Okay, good. All right. So our emotions, oftentimes in Reformed, I will speak bad about us at this point. Oftentimes in Reformed circles, we say emotions are bad. But here's the reality. Emotions are not bad because God gave us them. God gave us the ability to love. It's what it means to be created in His image, right? To feel love, to feel grief, to feel sadness. Jesus Himself wept at the tomb of Lazarus. I can't help but think that anxiety was at was happening to David when he was killing all of those animals. You know, that's what was pushing him forward to work hard, all of the processes that are going on in anxiety. So emotions are something that God has given to us, and they help us. And I can't remember who said this, but the emotions help move us within relationship, whether they be love or hate. Okay? They keep us going back and forth. Sue Johnson, she's a counselor. She's created something called emotion-focused therapy. It's great. It's very helpful working with couples. She says, emotion tells us a lot about where we are in the world, what matters to us. It orientates us. So emotion doesn't become the enemy anymore. People can stand alongside their anxiety and say, I'm anxious, I'm anxious. So then if we look at anxiety, as I was just saying, anxiety, the anxious processes within us that God's given to us alert us to danger. They motivate us to work harder. They raise our awareness to our surroundings. So when you're getting up when you're about ready to sit down at the test and you're thinking, do I know this or do I not? Am I going to do bad or am I going to do good? Like, there's a sense of danger ahead. And that's the anxiety going on within us. We're going to watch a little video here in a second about how our brain works and the processes that go on. And the anxious processes help us to look out for ourselves and for other people, whether that be our children, whether that be our loved ones. You know, if I'm driving down the road, my amygdala, which you'll hear in a second, my amygdala is alert because it's saying to me, it's keeping watch of what's going on as I'm driving down the road and my family's in the car. I got to have my amygdala there to keep me alert, and it helps me. And the anxiety reveals what matters to us. And this is one of the little the nooks and crannies that I think gets missed, is that the anxiety is actually revealing what matters to us. So if it's wanting to be perfect, you're wanting to do well on something. When bad things happen in the world, there's a care for this world that bad things shouldn't be happening. So the anxiety processes reveals what matters to us, and that's a key to unlock the anxiety within us. But because of the effects of sin, we get stuck here. We get anxious about being alone. We get anxious about dying. We get anxious about not having meaning. And so we ruminate over events or people in the past. And as I was thinking about this, the rumination is the missing of the attunement. The worry about the future is the hopelessness. And the anxiety about the future. And so there's this equation here that I think I'm going to skip over because on account of time. Because I want to push forward a little bit. So let's talk a little bit about what is the actual process that goes on in the brain. There are 3 parts to our brain, and I appreciate this slide because it uses language that is less evolutionary. So the first area there is number 1, the brainstem. That's the automatic stuff. It's your heartbeat. It's your your lungs, all your automatic processes within you. That's what's controlled down there in level 1. Level 2 is the limbic system. It's the stuff that's right inside here in the middle of the brain. That's the emotional part of the brain, and that's what we're going to talk about here in a second. The third level there is the cortex, all of the stuff at the top, all of the brain stuff that helps with functioning, putting your mind to something. That's the top level. And what happens is, okay, so then this next slide is the limbic system. You get these various parts. The amygdala, which I mentioned earlier, it's like a little almond inside your head. The hippocampus, the thalamus, and the hypothalamus. So what I want us to do is watch a brief, it's like 4 minutes, little video on how all these things operate.
Hi, I'm Dr. John Kenworthing. Welcome to the short tutorial on your brain on anxiety and stress. It is essential to know how our brain responds to the stimuli which trigger an anxiety response so that you are equipped to deal appropriately with anxiety. Let me highlight the key areas of your brain that are involved, and then I will explain what happens inside the brain. The thalamus is the central hub for sights and sounds. The thalamus breaks down incoming visual cues by size, shape, and colour, and auditory cues by volume and dissonance, and then signals the cortex. The cortex then gives raw sights and sounds meaning, enabling you to be conscious of what you are seeing and hearing. And I'll mention here that the prefrontal cortex is vital to turning off the anxiety response once the threat has passed. The amygdala is the emotional core of the brain, whose primary role is to trigger the fear response.
Okay, so I just want to make sure you're following this. So the thalamus is what's connected to all your sensors, your eyes, your skin, your ears, everything. All of that sensory stuff goes into the thalamus, which then gets taken into the cortex and gets evaluated, basically. And then he's going to talk about the amygdala, which is what's going to set off how we respond. So keep going.
Information passing through the amygdala is associated with an emotional significance. The bed nucleus of the stria terminals is particularly interesting when we discuss anxiety. While the amygdala sets off an immediate burst of fear, the BRST perpetuates the fear response, causing longer-term unease typical of anxiety. The locus coeruleus receives signals from the amygdala and initiates the classic anxiety response: rapid heartbeat, increased blood pressure, sweating, and pupil dilation. The hippocampus is your memory center, storing raw information from the senses, along with emotional baggage attached to the data by the amygdala. Now we know these key parts, what happens when we are anxious, stressed, or fearful? Anxiety, stress, and of course fear are triggered primarily through your senses. Sight and sound are first processed by the thalamus, filtering incoming cues and sent directly to the amygdala or to the cortex. Smell and touch go directly to the amygdala, bypassing the thalamus altogether. This is why smells often evoke very powerful memories or feelings. Any cues from your incoming senses that are associated with a threat in the amygdala, whether that threat is real or not, current or not, are immediately processed to trigger the fear response. This is the expressway. It happens before you consciously feel the fear. The hypothalamus and pituitary gland cause the adrenal glands to pump out high levels of the stress hormone cortisol. Too much cortisol short-circuits the cells of the hippocampus, making it difficult to organize the memory of a trauma or a stressful experience. Memories lose context and become fragmented. The body's sympathetic nervous system shifts into overdrive, causing the heart to beat faster, blood pressure to rise, and lungs to hyperventilate. Perspiration increases and the skin's nerve endings tingle, causing goosebumps. Your senses become hyper-alert, freezing you momentarily as you drink in every detail. Adrenaline floods to the muscles, preparing you to fight or run away. The brain shifts focus from digestion to focus on the potential dangers, sometimes causing evacuation of the digestive tract through urination, defecation or vomiting. Heck, if you're about to be eaten as someone else's dinner, why bother digesting your own? Only after the fear response has been activated does the conscious mind kick in. Some sensory information takes a more thoughtful route from the thalamus to the cortex. The cortex decides whether the sensory information warrants a fear response. If the fear is a genuine threat in space and time, the cortex signals the amygdala to continue being on alert. Fear is a good, useful response essential to survival. However, anxiety is a fear of something that cannot be located in space and time. Most often, it is that indefinable something triggered initially by something real that you sense, but that in itself is not threatening, but it is associated with a fearful memory. And the bed nucleus of the stria terminals perpetuate that fear response. Anxiety is a real fear response for the individual feeling anxious, and anxiety can be debilitating for the sufferer. Now that you know how anxiety happens in your brain, we can pay attention to how we can deliberately use our prefrontal cortex to turn off an inappropriate anxiety response once a threat has passed.
I know that was a lot. It went really fast. But that's the overall process. So if we go back to this. So sensory input goes into the thalamus, which then which goes around in through the prefrontal cortex and down into the amygdala, which sends off the emotions, and goes through the hippocampus, which is the memory. So when we talk about memories being stored emotions being stored in the brain, that's where they're stored. And then from the hippocampus to the hypothalamus, which then sends everything down into the spinal cord. And all of this is happening in split seconds. If you heard him, he said, all of this is happening even before you recognize there's an issue. So it's truly amazing how God has ordained our system, our brain, to work. And part of this process, if you notice, he wrote that number 2 up there. When the amygdala sends out all that information, there's a shutdown of areas of part of the brain. So one of those is the prefrontal cortex, your ability to think in the middle of anxious situations. So you're sitting in a test and you're trying to think of the answers. Well, no wonder you have trouble, you have test anxiety, because you're anxious and then you can't think through things because your prefrontal cortex has shut down. He also said that the digestion, all those processes stop because you're trying to be aware of what's going on. So the goal, as what we said, is to, as what you were talking about earlier, was to get to a point where we can manage the anxiety so we can bring the prefrontal cortex back online and we can think properly again. Okay? This next slide, it's probably better if you look at it on the on your sheet, because it's so hard to see the details. And I'm not necessarily as concerned about the details, but just the overall idea. The overall idea is this called the window of tolerance. So in the center there, that's ideally where we operate on day in and day out basis. But when we get triggered, when we get, when we're stimuli are pushing at us and we get anxious, we rise to the top, and our fight and flight system kicks into gear. So that's when we become anxious. We can't relax. We feel restless. Our high alert. He was saying on there, and you had the question about what do I look for? if someone's fidgeting, if you can tell somebody's getting flushed in the face, or you probably can't tell their heartbeat, but you might be able to see increased breathing, shallow breathing. Those are the signs that someone's getting anxious. So this system their sympathetic nervous system is kicking off, okay? That's that top line. The bottom part of it is where what we call the parasympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is the gas, and the parasympathetic nervous system is the brake. This is where you shut down. This is where you just become motionless and you can't deal with what's going on. So you shut down, and you fall into depression, you become lethargic, you can't answer, you can't think anymore. Some of you are probably like that right now because you're thinking, this is just way too much information. So ideally, we want to stay within that window of tolerance. We want to deal with the body to keep us in there. As I work with clients, I can't work with a client who's overly anxious or who's shut down. I need them to be in that window of tolerance so that they're able to think and able to process. If they move into one of those windows, then I got to move into something different to help them. So anxiety within our children, then, how do they become anxious? Well, there's the normal, scary, dangerous things. Things like dogs and water and bees. Things are scary. Things like throwing up. That was a thing in my household. The second thing is the parental influence. Okay? Believe it or not, all of us in this room as parents are part of setting off the anxiety within our children. And that happens prenatally. Research has been done that even prenatally, that child is beginning to know what anxiety is like. As soon as they're out and they're able to see, they can, those systems inside their mind, within their brain, are engaging ours, and mainly that's happening by the eyes. So how do you begin to attune to a child? You begin to look at them, right? You begin to look in their eyes, you goo goo gaga, you begin to orient yourself to them, and they look back at you and orient themselves to you. They may not know it, but they're being loved and they're being contained. They experience those things from you as you interact with them facially to them. But what happens when we become frightened and we start backing away, or we have a frightened voice, or we're dazed, or we get startled suddenly, or withdrawn or non-responsive? That child is picking up on our cues, okay? So if something drops, this happened in our household, and I had to learn how to correct this, but I would not lose it, but, I'm not ashamed to say it. I did lose it on occasions. Things would fall from the counter, and I'd be like, it's loud, and I'd be like, ah! Well, they're going to get scared, right? On the other side, the frightening behavior, if you're coming into them looming in attack posture, or sudden movements, or mocking or teasing, you're intrusive into their world, emotionally reactive and loud, startling noises. With all of this going at them, they're going to get frightened. So we as parents are influences on our anxiety of our kids. The other thing is just DNA. Anxiety and trauma can get passed down from generation to generation. The effects of it. And again, that's that sin, the effects of the sin in our life playing out with our families. Foods. We think of caffeine and sugar. All other kind of foods. Some people, it could be gluten. There's more information about this than ever. Processed foods, some people say, is more, can be anxiety producing. We can think of pre-existing conditions might offer anxiety. The presence of screens. I was thinking about this, and I remember my mom and dad saying, "Don't get close to the TV," right? Don't get close to the TV because it's not good for your mind. Well, now we stare at a screen like this for probably 2 or 3 hours a day. Maybe not all at once, but cumulative effect, we're staring at a screen. What is that doing to our mind? Screens, cultural effects, societal pressures. Our kids now, I see what I've just recently came out of teaching high school again for a year, and what they're pressuring them to do now versus even when I was in school, let alone some other folks in this room, is unbelievable. No wonder they're anxious and they feel the pressure to perform and to be perfect. And then, of course, world events, as we've even mentioned here tonight. The world events, even what's going on Hamas and Israel. Mom and Dad, are we going to be in trouble? I remember 9/11 and being concerned. I lived in Virginia at the time. And while it wasn't Northern Virginia, it was still in Virginia. And I knew that there could be potential. I remember thinking to myself, could this be the start? And could we be in trouble where we were? These are the sources of anxiety for our children. And so God has given us as parents as the tool to help work with the anxiety of our children. We are the tool. Believe it or not, God has given us what's called mirror neurons. So that way we are, what they see in us is reflected in them. So if we are calm, they're going to get that sense of calm and as well. They're going to know that they're loved and they're provided for and contained. As it says there, we can help be the calm in the storm, just as Jesus was with the disciples. And that's left over from the trauma, but I think it fits here as well. And unfortunately, because of sin in the world and the sin even in our own lives and our experience with anxiety, oftentimes, and I've said this myself to my child, it's okay, get over it, let's go. I mean, we all have probably said that. And we probably have had it been said to us. Just move on, get over it, come on, let's go. But what that does is it doesn't give them the opportunity of containment nor attunement. And so the goal here is to help give them an experience of those things that help them to know them so that way they can move on and walk through the whatever fearful event it is. And one of the other things I said earlier about the anxiety helps us to know reveals the heart of what's going on. I think this is another area, whereas developmentally, us saying to our kid, hey, it's going to be okay, get on with it, let's get on with it, that's not helpful to them. Because even developmentally, they need to experience bodily that containment and that attunement rather than just being told, hey, Jesus said, don't be anxious, let's go. Get over it. Because cognitively, their prefrontal cortex still isn't even fully developed. So how can we expect them to, even at 5-year-old, to say, hey, I know you're scared of the bee, let's go, come on. Just deal with it. We have to be mindful of the developmental area of our kids. So with the 5-year-old and the bee, it's okay, Charlie, I know you're scared of the bee. I'm here with you. Let's just move on, and we're gonna get ourselves out of the bee. He's right here with me. What have I done? I've looked at him in the eye, and I've said, I'm with you. You are safe. I know you. I see your anxiety. I see the fear going off, and you're with me. I'm your dad, right? I'm strong. I'm bigger than the bee. And so I'm going to walk with you. And now Charlie has had an experience of, yes, he was fearful of the bee, but he doesn't have to stay fearful of the bee. He can walk with me and we can move forward. Does that make sense? This is where we often think about, with anxiety, we try to just get through it. We try to get beyond it or over it or out of it. We think, man, I just don't want to deal with this anymore. I'm over it. I just want to just push it away and never to deal with it again. But that's not helpful to bring about the resolution. And so this is where Sue Johnson said, we need to be able to come alongside of the anxiety and say, okay, what's going on? What are you fearful of right now? Move from fear to curiosity. Because here's the thing. Curiosity is going to bring that prefrontal cortex online and shut down the amygdala. It's why the craze of mindfulness is out there. Believe it or not, that's what mindfulness does. It's just the aspect of bringing curiosity, shutting down the amygdala, and re-engaging the prefrontal cortex so you can begin to think. And you do that by curiosity. Oh, so your heart's beating fast right now, is it? Yes. Yes, Dad, it is. All right. You're doing okay. I'm here with you. Everything's going to be okay. Let's move on. It's helping them be curious about their own body and allowing things to come back online. But if you if you go the top-down approach, which is just, hey, it's okay, you're going to be fine, just get over it. Hey, God says not to be anxious, so we just need to move on. The top-down approach is trying to use the prefrontal cortex to fix the situation. And that it doesn't work that way because the body doesn't work that way. The body works from the bottom-up approach of saying, okay, I got to attend to my body and a lot just to my breathing. One of the things that the first thing to do when you're seeing somebody anxious is just get them to breathe. Believe it or not, that's the first, anybody that's anxious is always breathing shallowly. the first thing we want to do is just get them to breathe deeper. If you can't do anything, ideally, the studies have shown it's the exhale that is actually more helpful than anything. So if you're slowing down the exhale, so if you're counting in for 4 and exhaling for 8 or 6, you're slowing the exhale. There's a nerve that runs down from the top of your head down in through the front of the body. It's called the vagus nerve, and that nerve helps to regulate the system. And if you're exhaling slowly, that vagus nerve begins to slow the processes down. But even just simply as bringing their mind and their just awareness to their breathing, not even changing it, just saying, can you breathe? Can you notice you're breathing in and out? You're not even asking them to breathe a certain way. Just having them notice begins to shut that amygdala down and initiates that prefrontal cortex. These are things called grounding interventions. If you're into the lingo, naming what they're experiencing in their body. Another thing that they can do if they're really worked up, it's called 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So naming 5 things they can see, 4 things they can hear, 3 things they can feel, 2 things they taste, and 1 thing they smell. Again, you're just engaging their mind and shutting that part down, the amygdala, so that the prefrontal cortex can engage. Another thing you can do, and this is not necessarily acute with somebody like in a panic attack, but over time, if somebody is truly anxious, you can get them to do what we call progressive muscle relaxation, where you have them lie down or sit in the chair still, you can get doing some breathing, and then you say, okay, tense up your toes. Okay, now relax them. Tense up your foot and relax them and go all the way to the top. Doing various muscle groups at the time. So as you're taking a test or what was given, this breathing and maybe even just helping them just to relax, take a muscle group and just tense it and relax it. That might be enough to help them through the test as they take it to keep them going. This is a really interesting one. Expressive reflection. I experienced this with my own daughter in a sense where I had mentioned to you about throwing up. She had extreme fear of throwing up. And she would have outright panic attacks about throwing up as a kid. It stems from medical trauma that she had, and it's carried with her, even still to the day, a little bit. But what I was able to do with her, at some point I realized this, and I just tried it on her. I said, okay, so tell me about what you're experiencing right now in your body. And of course she's huffing and puffing, and and I'm just trying to be calm, and I'm just trying to be with her, and I'm just saying, describe to me what's going on. Well, my stomach, my stomach is upset and everything. Okay, so draw a picture or make a mental picture of what that looks like, what that might look like. A volcano, Okay, so what color is the volcano? And before long, you could almost see the panic just completely shift because she was able to re-engage her mind. And that amygdala shut down. And it was amazing to see And then I drew her attention to it. Do you see you're not, as worked up about this now as what you were? Oh, yeah. So then we were able to talk about it. Another thing is trigger reflection. So being able to take a mental note of some of these things that are triggers to your child and being able to talk about them. Maybe not necessarily in that instant, but at a separate time, being able to say, okay, seeing that dog really triggered me, really gets me anxious. Okay, so what's going on what do you experience when you do get anxious? What is it about the dog? Would you like to, and I think this reveals the heart of the matter. I want to pet the dog. I want to experience the joy of the dog. But the dog is barking at me and scares me. And you feel the two emotions at once. It's that ambivalence. Did you hear that? It's the joy. I want to experience the joy of petting the dog. But the dog is scary. He's barking at me. He's going to hurt me. And so you're getting these two conflicting emotions at once, and it sets off the panic. Last thing would be not the last thing, but turn the attention to healthy things or healthy habits. If they're, let me see here. If they're anxious about being overnight and away from home, you can help turn them to what has it been like when they went to grandma's house, or they stayed at somebody else's house that maybe was a success. You turn their mind away from thinking about the bad and helping them to consider the good. Another thing about anxiety is that we need to help teach them the tolerance of the unknowable. So being able to say, I don't know. And this is where I think our sinfulness gets into play, because we want to know. We want to have control. We want to look perfect. And we're not going to look perfect. And so we as parents can help them by even modeling for them, hey, I don't know. I don't know what we're going to do right now, but we're going to walk through this together. And we're going to trust God as we go through it, because He is in control. He's that outer boundary. And this is what I was saying earlier to you, sir, about your idea of me coming and talking to the kids. A lot of these things you can do without them even knowing any of these terms. It's you being able to work through some of your own stuff so that you can be present with your child and just be with them in where they're at. I know I'm looking at time and I'm thinking, I'm getting anxious. I wanted to look through some scripture because I wanted to be able to show you, hey, this is not just all science and so forth. This is actually, I think this is a reflection of what's going on in the scriptures. So let's look at probably one of the classic examples, Philippians 4:4-9. Rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I will say, rejoice. Let your reasonableness be known to everyone. The Lord is at hand. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Did you hear the attunement? Where was it? What'd you say? Okay, being known to God. How else? Yes. I think there's part of that, but there's also something else there. It's a practice. Let your prayer be prayer with thanksgiving. Prayer is an opportunity for us to experience the attunement of the Lord. Because remember, prayer, he knows exactly what we're going to say. It doesn't change. I mean, he does use it for his purposes, but it doesn't necessarily change his mind. Prayer is a grace for us, a means of grace for us to know the Lord's love and work in our hearts. Because oftentimes in prayer, we walk away the one changed, right? Yes, I think the Lord is at hand, I think is both attunement and containment. The Lord is at hand. He is your rock. Do not be anxious about anything. Then he says, continues on, finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, commendable, if there's any excellence, anything worthy of praise, think about these things. Your prefrontal cortex, guiding the mind to say, hey, these are what we ought to be thinking. Rather than, when we're not anxious, hey, this is where our minds, the scriptures is calling us to go. So when we begin to think, helping our child think about being overnight, we want to care for them in their fears, being able to name, okay, you don't want to go over to so-and-so's overnight. Tell me more about that. What's going on there? Are you fearful of something? Has something ever been done to you? Have kids made fun of you? Or, something else? When have you enjoyed going over to somebody's house? That's attuning to them. That's listening to them, helping them experience your attunement and containment, right? But then you're also calling them to think, okay, Johnny's mom is there for you. If you need something, you are safe. She's with you, and you can go over there and have a wonderful time. I want you to think about what the good that you're going to have when you go over to Johnny's and you're going to go play bowling and you're going to go bicycling or whatever. Think about those things. I think that that's what he's calling us to there in that. I have a whole host of these, but I want to do this one. I want to do this one. The Lord is my shepherd. We know this psalm probably backwards and forwards. But there's the change of pronouns is important. I was memorizing this maybe a couple years ago, and it really hit me as I was memorizing it, because he says, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. It's all pointed at him, right? But it's in the third person. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for what? For you are with me. What a change. David had to have experienced what it meant to know the presence of the Lord in the midst of his fear and the evil. He's not just some other God over here who provides me what I need. No, he is personally with me in the midst of evil. For he says to the Lord, you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. What a presence to know that in the midst of anxiety and fear, that the Lord is with us.